Could Pochettino be fired from the US men's national team prior to the 2026 World Cup? Probably not, but it's also not a 0% chance. Is there a scenario where he could be fired this summer? I don't know, and I find it unlikely. But let's say the United States crashes out early in the Gold Cup, let's say semifinals or quarterfinals, and we don't do well against Switzerland and Turkey in the friendlies that we're going to have prior to the Gold Cup. Do we just trust the process, or do we hit the panic button? Is it possible that Pochettino could just walk away? Probably not, but that's more likely than him getting fired. So do the results this summer even matter? What about the roster that just came out? Well, today we're going to be talking about all of that with Herc Gomez. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo, and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. And today we have part one of a two-part interview with Herc Gomez, or interview/discussion. For part one, which is today, we're going to be talking about Pochettino, the US men's national team, the roster, this summer, and much more. Now for part two, we're going to be addressing the following question. Why has the US men's national team never had a world-class player? It's a long discussion despite being just one question. Now you can sit back, relax, and hit the like button because you're about to watch taller and better looking Tom Cruise talk to Herc Gomez about soccer. Yes, so don't forget to drop a like in this video if you haven't already. I will not be asking that during the discussion. So let's play the intro and start the episode. Okay, Herc, welcome back.
Oh, is that? I'm sorry. I was expecting like a whole intro kind of thing. You're just like, welcome back. How you doing?
You've been here enough that I'm not doing that anymore. No. No, but I'm doing great. And thanks for coming back once again, because when we talked about this episode, there was one way I was going to go about it, but then the roster came out, and I mean, at least for me, the roster was a lot different than I expected. I think for yourself as well. And I'm pretty sure we're going to dive into this at some point. But I'm kind of interested in you sharing your thoughts on the roster. And then I want to talk about the whole Pochettino thing of like, is there a scenario where we go to the World Cup without him? But before we start, what's your first reaction to the roster that came out the week we're recording this? This will be out the week after, but the week we're recording this, we got the roster. Shocked?
Kinda. Not for the reasons people would think one would be shocked, because I think it's the country we live in, it's the fan support that you have. A lot of people don't know why Weston McKennie's not on the roster, why Giovanni Reina's not on the roster, why Timothy Weah is not on the roster, why Anthony Robinson, is not on the roster. And the biggest one, obviously, Christian Pulisic. So there's a lot of like what's going on here. I think this comes with the territory when you talk about the U.S. So that wasn't too surprising for me. I'm surprised with how everything played out. I'm surprised, kinda, not really, by Christian Pulisic. Those people who speak Spanish and follow me on Aro Nunca, about a week before the roster came out, we started talking about the roster, the U.S. roster, briefly. And I kind of threw it out there. I don't know. Something tells me we're not going to see an A team. Something tells me this isn't going to be what we think, And
Why did Pulisic not surprise you, though? That's what I'm wondering.
Because I've been hearing for quite some time that he's been dealing with something, a hip flexor in the hip region. And word is he asked for time off to Milan. And Milan, who is negotiating his contract, by the time this airs, I don't know if that's going to be different, if there's going to be any final news on that, but was negotiating his contract. And we're now on the third coach with Sergio Conceição on the same project. And we're fighting in the Coppa Italia, and we're fighting for Champions League positions at that time. This was going months ago, had said, no, sorry, we can't afford to let you rest right now. We can't afford to fix this chronic, and I'm doing air quotes right now, issue that you have. You've got to battle through it. And he did. but it's also why we saw an inconsistent Christian Pulisic. We saw a Christian Pulisic that sometimes would play, sometimes would not. We saw a Christian Pulisic sometimes look like he was fresh, sometimes would not. So he had no control there. Well, theoretically, where is Christian Pulisic going to have the most control in his footballing world? It's going to be with the U.S. men's national team. I mean, he's been there for the better part of a decade, the face of the program. You know, he's gone back to back, heavy grind seasons, and he just did the very frustrating Nations League where he didn't look like himself, at least not to me. So, putting that all into context, I wasn't too surprised. It doesn't mean that fans shouldn't be upset. I just wasn't too surprised.
What I'm wondering is, and I think you kind of implied this I think on Twitter yesterday. You put it on X yesterday, which you said that Pulisic might be dealing with a hip injury or whatever it is. It hasn't been officially reported. We'll make that clear, but there's rumors about that. But that's not what Matt Crocker said.
Yeah, and this is important. This is something
Yeah.
that immediately came across my radar. Is it's not Christian Pulisic's camp that's saying this. It's U.S. Soccer, it's Matt Crocker, it's Mauricio Pochettino that are making it known this is his decision, Christian Pulisic's decision. I've said it many times. This is a very unlikable team, probably the most unlikable national team that I can recall. You'd have to go back to the end of the Bruce Arena days to really find such an unlikable team. And even then, not even anywhere close to what we have going on right now. They've got an issue. They're not liked in their own country. They don't draw well. U.S. soccer, since the failed World Cup, has taken a lot of heat. You had one person at the helm for so long. People demanded change. Here comes change. And it looks like on the men's side, this program is regressing. So I think they're doing damage control. I think they're trying to say, look, this is not on us. This is on Christian, his camp. So I thought that was very telling because they could have easily said, hey, the player is dealing with something like they did with Yunus Musa. Yunus Musa's personal reasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which to me screams that Yunus Musa, at least if I'm trying to deduce what's happening, has been told, hey, you don't have a place in Milan. You got to find somewhere. And that's his priority because wherever he finds, they're going to ask him to be, let's face it, he's not had that great of a time at Milan. He's going to have to do a preseason earnest place, most likely wherever he goes. So that makes sense to me. Like, I really feel in the grand scheme of things, the Gold Cup, and I keep hearing this, it's the version of the Euros for CONCACAF. Settle down. There's a reason Keylor Navas year after year would not want to play in it. For some of these players, it takes away a lot more than it actually gives them. And if you're in Christian Pulisic's shoes, if you're in Yunus Musa's shoes, where you're going to be a regular. I mean, Christian Pulisic's going to be a regular in the starting 11. Yunus Musa is probably going to be a regular, not in the starting 11 per se, but even though he's been in the 18 at least, in the 26, absolutely. So there are things that are higher in the pecking order that fans are not going to want to hear, but it's a reality. Fans want players who will die for the team. And I had a comment yesterday. I believe it was Dom who said it on Twitter yesterday. He put something like other countries, players would die for their country. They would die to wear the crest. Mm-hmm. And I responded, well, other countries, that's true. They would die for the crest, but fans would kill them if they didn't. It's a reality. Culturally speaking.
To be fair, Dom did scream at JT Batson in Kansas.
well, but that's. I mean, and I say this with all due respect to US. You know what a proper footballing country is, if you want to consider that proper. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is, that's cultural. It's in the fabric of their everyday life. So yes, that is true. But there are also repercussions for not, playing with your national team in a friendly, in a Gold Cup, in a Nations League, et cetera, et cetera. That's not really the case here. It feels U.S. soccer just feels so corporate. It feels like Christian Pulisic not being with the U.S. men's national team hurts the U.S. men's national team more on the commercial side than it actually does on the playing side.
Yeah, what you said is kind of interesting because I think it was the 2019 Copa America that Neymar didn't play for Brazil. And then they finally won it again, right? And I think Everton at the time on the wing played very well. And there were calls in Brazil's like, leave Neymar out. We don't need him.
Yep.
We would
Yep.
never do that to Pulisic. He cannot
Yep.
play there. Everyone's gonna, we need Christian Pulisic. We need Christian Pulisic. And that's not to say it's because Brazil has insane depth, because there's no player at Neymar's level in Brazil. So it is insanity, but it's just what you said, the accountability of you
Exactly.
have to want to play for this team. And I think that might be one of the things that Pochettino might not be understanding too, because with Argentina, it's the same thing. It's like you really
Well,
want to be here. When he heard that from Pulisic, he's seen Messi play banged up for Argentina. And then he's probably hearing that from Pulisic and he's just not getting it.
yeah, that's it's pot calling the kettle black there, Pochettino. Because if we want to talk about players being invested, how invested has Pochettino looked
Very
for
low.
the?
And I think that's a good moment to transition to Pochettino, because we talked about a bit of the roster. And I think outside of that, I think there was also a few omissions. I find it weird that Paxton didn't even get a shot, because it seems like he earned an opportunity. Whether he's going to do well or not, I don't know. But he didn't even get an opportunity. And there's a few other names that we mentioned that were left out. I mentioned in the stream, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it in Football Americas and Vamos podcast. My question you hear now is Pochettino, because if we go back when Berhalter was fired and Pochettino was hired like a month later or so, that was our guy for the World Cup. That's it. And most likely, he still is the guy. But if we go back a few months, the possibility of going to the 2026 World Cup without Pochettino was pretty much zero. It's like, yeah, he's going unless he leaves or something happens. There's right now, is there any scenario where you think he could walk or get fired?
It's U.S. soccer, and U.S. soccer usually fulfills those cycles, those contracts, if you will. So no, but is there a remote chance that they have a disastrous Gold Cup? Because right now, if we did a power rankings, how could you honestly put the U.S. in the top three? You'd have Mexico, Canada, and no order, but Mexico, Canada, and you could say, well, the U.S., but then the U.S. hasn't beat Panama in how long?
It's been 3 official tournaments that they knocked us out, if I'm not
So
mistaken.
so you would have to theoretically say, well, they're fourth, and then Jamaica, if they ever get their act together, can seriously hurt the U.S. men's national team or
What
any
about
other
Saudi
national team,
Arabia?
yeah, or even Saudi Arabia. So like theoretically, they could have a disastrous Gold Cup, and that puts a lot of pressure on Mauricio Pochettino, and then somewhere along the lines, disastrous friendlies against better competition. We heard reports of Argentina in Qatar. Like, let's just say something like that happens and they get seriously embarrassed. There could be a scenario where U.S. soccer says we got to cut our losses. This is just trending in the wrong direction. There's a clear regression here, and who's the only other person on earth that knows this national team well enough where they could take it in an emergency situation?
Bob?
No,
Bruce?
no.
Are you going to say Berhalter? He's not leaving Chicago.
Just come on,
No.
man. He's not leaving Chicago, you said? I guarantee
I
you
mean, they can get
there's a
Jurgen.
clause in this
They
guy's
can get Jurgen.
contract. Come on, man. These coaches now put clauses in their contracts where if there's a European opportunity or national team opportunity, there's an exit clause for so much money. So that's all negotiable. But and this is very remote. Let's just say there's a 1% chance of this happening, but there's still a chance. Like the reality is there's nothing about Pochettino right now that has made fans feel good about the U.S. men's national team or hopeful about where it's going right now. Um, this is probably the darkest, moment in this national team's history, and I say that on the field because off the field there's been very dark moments. You had the Berhalter, Reina drama and whatnot, but on the field, there was hope. On the field, you were like, oh, there's something to build on. Look how young and hopeful these players are and what the ceiling can be. But since then, Gio doesn't play. Since then, Tyler's been hurt for the better part of 2 years. Since then, players have come in and out. There have been unfulfilled potentials with a lot of these players. There have been more injuries right now heading into this Gold Cup, which is supposed to be the dry run to the World Cup. I'll read off some names. You're not going to have Christian Pulisic. You're not going to have Anthony Robinson. You're not going to have Yunus Musa. You're not going to have let's just say maybe not clear out starters, but guys who could be on that fringe. Josh Sargent, Paxton
Scally.
Harrison, Austin Trusty, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Griffin Yao, Caleb Wiley, Joe Scally, John Tolkien. That's got to be a talking point. You went from having 25 players in a 26-man roster that were European-based, with the one exception being a backup goalkeeper, to 17 of 27. What happened there? What did Mauricio Pochettino see in these Major League Soccer players that he didn't see, in a Paxton Erickson, that he didn't see, in a Joe Scally? That's got to be a serious question here. And that goes back to, how fans feel about the, I guess, hope for this team going forward.
Yeah, I just don't think that you are right. The odds of firing Pochettino a few months ago were zero, in my opinion, when he got hired, obviously. Right now, it's definitely increased to 1%, which is still extremely low. But I just don't see a scenario where they would even consider Berhalter, because there's something I heard from people within U.S. soccer, without giving names. Part of the reason they did hire Pochettino, and it goes back to what you said about how everything feels very corporate, was that they were not only concerned about the results, but also the excitement and the way sponsors and donors were looking into this, right? And the fan perception is important in that sense. Obviously, they don't make decisions based on what fans think, that they shouldn't actually. No club or federation should, but the corporate aspect does lead you to that because they're your clients. And then that's one of the reasons why they seek what they seek. One of the many reasons, of course. Moving back to Berhalter would go against all of that and the results on the field, because let's be real, Berhalter in his first cycle, there's a case for him. There's many cases against him. The second cycle, it's mostly just a bunch of cases against him. I just don't see how that happens. And if they were to hit the panic button, an option would also be unavailable Pellegrino Materazzo. Would that solve the issues? We don't know. It's a risk. But I agree with you that depending, if let's say we get knocked out in like a quarterfinals in the Gold Cup, right, or even semifinals, which is a disaster for the United States at home, especially 1 year prior to the World Cup. What do? Do you hit the
Which
panic button? It's pretty
which
confusing.
could be a very, very plausible scenario. I mean, I believe those semifinals or quarterfinals are in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say something goes south. You may not have the fan support you're looking for. You may be on a different side of the draw. Look, the reality is the Gold Cup's in the U.S., so that's a massive, massive. It's a massive advantage for Mexico and the U.S. If this was in Honduras, if this was in Costa Rica, Jamaica, I don't know if the U.S. are making it to the semis. I don't know. How can you say you feel good about them when their away record or even on neutral ground record is so poor? I believe since the Greg Berhalter era, we're going on
We won
one
one game.
win, one win
Well,
for them.
let's not count like the island nations that we beat, but I think it was just Honduras away in World Cup qualifying. That's it.
Yeah, and maybe Iran in the World Cup.
Which
That's
is
it.
neutral. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that's it. That's
Mhm.
it. So it's not exactly something to hang your hat on. So they've got a massive advantage here. So it's all set up. And listen, let's be realistic. There is no draw in the Gold Cup. It's not fair. They place the U.S. on one side right here, and they place Mexico on the other, and they strategically make it so these two can only meet if everything goes to plan in the final to maximize those cells. So it's kind of, while it is a dry run for the World Cup, it really isn't. And I know fans are going to be upset, but you're not. I just counted the guys you're not going to have. Like, what are you trying to do? Identify a player or two? You're trying to hope, which I guess could be beneficial. That Sebastian Berhalter shows you something and could be a depth piece. That Diego Luna keeps proving that, hey, he could hang at this CONCACAF level. Like that could be a depth piece. What, I guess that's what you're trying to get out of it. Patrick Ajiman, Brian White, who could be behind Ricardo Pepi and Folarin Balogun, because I think times have changed. You used to go into January camps and you say we could find a gem or two. Clint Dempsey, Jimmy Conrad, uh, Eddie Johnson. A lot of these guys got their starts in a January camp. Those type of times have changed. Like theoretically, anybody who is of worth is already identified. The guys who have not are the guys who are, injured right now and aren't even in contention. A Cole Campbell out in Dortmund, that could be interesting. A year out from World Cup, what could this kid blossom into? Because that was pretty much Christian Pulisic's story, right?
Norkai Banks.
Nokai Banks, they're Damian Downs. I don't know. There are interesting prospects here, but that's what it is. So a year out from a World Cup, you shouldn't be saying, "Oh, can we find a prospect?" You should be saying, "This is my 11. I want to see what they can do in this system. This is what it should be really for." And you don't have that option right now. A lot of that's not on Pochettino because it's not his fault. They scheduled a Club World Cup and gave importance to it over, the Continental Tournament, but it is what it is. So given all these factors, it's going to be difficult for Pochettino. It's going to be difficult to really get something out of this tournament, even if they win it. Because it's one of these trap tournaments. You win it, you're like, shit, you were supposed to win it because that was the bar before you. They've won it with the C team. They won it with the B team. You know what I mean?
It's like the state tournaments in Brazil these days.
Exactly.
The joke is that if you're like one of the top teams like Flamengo, Palmeiras, that tournament sucks because if you win it, they're like, okay, you were supposed to.
And
if you lose it, you lose the job. You lose your job.
Exactly. It's the same thing. It's the same thing in Mexico with the cup competitions. You're supposed to win it, but if you lose it, you're done for.
You can only lose then from it. That's all you can do. You can't win anything out of it.
It's not really beneficial. So this Gold Cup right now is a trap tournament for Pochettino.
And last but not least in this episode, very quickly, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to go through the exact quote, but Bruce Arena went to London in Tim Howard's podcast, and he essentially went on, not a rant, but he kind of said that he thought the coach should be American because they don't understand the culture. The coach needs to understand the culture and blah, 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 which to a certain extent, he's right. I think the coach does need to understand the culture. I just don't think it has anything to do with the coach being a foreigner or not. Like, for example, Jesse Marsch is a foreigner, and seems like he understood it pretty well.
What culture? I'm curious on this, though. What culture?
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I was trying to figure out with U.S. soccer's culture, which, I mean.
What's the culture of U.S. soccer? Are we talking?
We're talking about lack of accountability. That's one thing with the culture of U.S. soccer.
No, stop. Soccer. Okay. That we can say that, but listen, we can go down to your Fuchi Bowl and say that about Brazil right now. We can go down to Italy over the years. Like there have been some real like horror stories, but I'm talking footballing culture, because if I were to say, how is Carlo Ancelotti supposed to bring back a Jogo Bonito? That's a valid question, right? Because that's
very valid. Yeah,
that's the DNA of Brazilian football,
which he won't, by the way. But yeah,
what?
Yeah,
I mean. And honestly, you could probably argue that's not what they need. You could probably argue what they need is structure.
Well, Brazil's for another episode, but I get it. I get the point.
Yeah, but what's the footballing culture for the U.S. that's so difficult to understand, that they need to have spirit, be organized, and defend well? Like, is that the culture you're banking on? Because
I think we have an identity crisis, because if you go back to the U.S. culture years ago, you had
that's fine. That's identity, but what's the culture? So
that's a tough question, actually.
No, because there is no culture. Like, this country's so big. There's 360 million people here, and if you talk about the culture, footballing culture here, like what are you talking about? So when I hear Bruce Arena, and Bruce and I have had our goes in the past, and this is way before your time. You were too young to, like, honestly, 2018, like actual goes at each other, like on the phone type of deal.
I was not that young in 2018.
How old were you?
Well, right now I'm 30. So 2018, I was 23.
23 years old, which is, I'm sure you were probably in the stands singing, I believe.
That is not me. That's not my soccer culture, no.
But that's what I'm saying. What culture are we talking about?
Well, 2018, after we failed to qualify, I tuned out for a bit.
I think it changed. And listen, I watch your channel, and I've seen some of the people you have on here who have been around since the 90s, and they couldn't answer this question. They beat around the bush, so it's like, what culture are you talking about? Because if you're going to tell me, well, no country's ever won with a foreign manager, you fucking idiot. How many countries have won the World Cup?
Wait. That one's a funny one, because I called out Eric on this one, because they always bring this up, and I said,
that's your first issue.
And when I was talking to him, I said, That's the first thing, right? How many countries have won a World Cup? And usually, countries that win the World Cup, they have such a strong culture that they have good enough players and good enough coaches. Now, if you look at the best underdog stories of all time, they're usually led by foreign coaches.
Of
You go to
course.
South
Why is
Korea
that?
2002. Well, because they don't have good coaches. The culture, they need to hire someone from outside to show the way, show the path.
You know the pyramid within U.S. soccer and the coaching ranks better than I. You are involved. You've been involved at many levels. How good is the coaching in the U.S. in that pyramid?
It's mediocre at best.
How expensive is to become a coach in that period, in that pyramid?
Probably among the most expensive in the world, if not the most expensive.
So I think we're of the same train of thought here. Is you need, I'll put it in terms that they will understand, U.S. soccer. You need consulting. You need consulting here. If this is a corporate world, you need consultants to make you better here. You need better coaching in the United States, okay, and to maximize that talent. And this is what I will agree with Pochettino. His assessment when he came in, I thought was spot on. Are you going to win the World Cup? No, most likely not. But can we be a South Korea? Can we be a Morocco? Can we be a Turkey? Can we be those type of nations that make a run in a World Cup? Absolutely. You can absolutely be those teams. Now, it takes great discipline. It takes a little bit of fortune, okay? Because even Morocco, for as brilliant as they were in a group with, bear with me, the CONCACAF winners, okay, in Canada, that up until that point to the World Cup had shown great things, a golden generation in Belgium, World Cup runners-up in Croatia.
A golden generation of Croatia, too.
Yeah. World Cup runners-up of Croatia. And
Croatia
in
knocked
their,
out Brazil.
yeah, and in their group, okay, both Morocco and Croatia made it to the semifinals. But in that run to the semifinals, they played teams like Portugal, Spain, France. And oftentimes we're very fortunate not to have 3 hung on them. And they defended with 10 guys hanging against the crossbar, on the crossbar. And they made a ridiculous run. But people forget about these things, right? People want progressive football. People want innovation. People want to see that there's an advancement in your play. When it's tournament football, the only thing that matters is that you advance. The best moment of the U.S. in the World Cup is 2002. 2002. Okay? They went 1-1-1, which is the CONCACAF special. Okay? 1 win, 1 loss, 1 draw. They backed their way into the next round because South Korea beat Portugal. When they got smashed by Poland in South Korea and go on to the next round to face a CONCACAF rival, and that's still today they want to hide behind, well, that's the best, U.S. team. You did nothing different than any other CONCACAF team, that's gone far. 1-1-1. So there are nuances to this game, just like there are nuances to no coaches ever, no foreign coaches ever won a World Cup type of thing. It's not that cut and dry.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also think, like, when we talk about Pochettino caring or not caring, I don't think it has anything to do with him being a foreigner or not. We know Jurgen Klinsmann cared a lot, and he was not American.
Right.
Jesse Marsh of
And
Canada.
he was very criticized.
Exactly. So I think if Pochettino doesn't care, which I'm not saying he does, I can't state that. It's what it looks like, but it doesn't mean it's true. It's not because he's a foreigner. It's because it's something that comes from himself.
Yeah.
Right? Nothing to do where he's from. That's overall what I wanted to talk about for this episode. You guys can let us know your thoughts in the comment section. If you think Pochettino, if there's any chance that Pochettino won't be our coach in 2026, which would be kind of crazy if you think about it, and drop a like before you go. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.